The QX oyster disease had the potential to devastate New South Wales' most valuable fishery. Today I'm up at Port Stephens to talk to the scientists about how they've managed to tackle the threat. QX is a parasite that attacks the Sydney rock oyster, invading its stomach so it stops feeding and eventually dies. It almost wiped out the oyster industry on rivers like the Hawkesbury.
We didn't think that we had a future, and we just didn't know which way to turn, and there was all these cards up in the air, and we just waiting for them to fall to see which direction that we had to go.
So the team at the Port Stephens Fisheries Research Centre has spent the last 15 years trying to produce a super oyster that's resistant to the parasite, and they've finally cracked it.
Take a large number down, a population that hopefully represents the genetics within the general oyster population, expose them to a disease, bring the survivors back, breed those and just do it over and over again. And after 6 or 7 generations, we've finally arrived at something that is effectively QX resistant.
This 7th generation oyster spat will grow in a nursery, then be released back into wild oyster leases. The QX resistant oysters are already thriving here on the Hawkesbury, but it's only one step in the fight to save the industry. Long-time oyster farmers like John Stubbs have had to make massive changes to their setup. The old system where wild oysters were caught on tarred timber posts has been scrapped, and the government has spent $3 million removing all the timber leases in the river.
It just shows you an example of the old infrastructure that we used to use.
All the train tracks as well.
Yeah, post and rail set up for the sticks that used to sit on it.
These days, the farmers use a system of floating cages made of recycled plastic where the oysters can breed. And instead of Sydney rock oysters, they're now breeding Pacific oysters, which aren't affected by the QX parasite.
Some of the little babies.
Baby oyster spat is brought in from Tasmania and planted in these specially designed socks inside a cage. As they grow, the oysters are moved out into the cages. And once they reach 12 months old, they're ready for harvest.
These are some of the more mature size Pacific oysters.
Yep.
And this is ready for market size.
Beautiful. Gosh, good looking oyster.
Yeah, they're not bad.
Back on land, the farmers are also working with scientists to keep a close eye on the QX disease. In John's makeshift lab, researchers from Hornsby Shire Council constantly check local oysters for any traces of QX.
We take a section of the digestive gland of the oyster, smear it on slides, stain it, and then we view to see if it's positive or negative for QX.
The next step is to eradicate the QX threat altogether and to breed bigger, meatier oysters that will thrive in our rivers all year round. This vital research is funded by the Fisheries Research and Development Corporation. Find out more about their great work on the FRDC website.